So you may have heard about a group of about 200 Central American migrants who made a final triumphant walk on Sunday, singing and cheering as they made their way toward an official border crossing to apply for asylum in the United States. The day was supposed to cap a 2,500-mile journey that began more than a month ago on the Mexican border with Guatemala. But once the migrants, many of them women carrying small children in their arms, reached the San Isidro port, the caravan appeared to collide head-on with the Trump administration. Moments before the migrants arrived at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection offices at the border between the United States and Mexico, officials announced that none of the migrants from the caravan would be processed for asylum because the agency was full for the day. They had no more interviews. The afternoon announcement stunned organizers and immigrant rights advocates, especially considering statements earlier this week by the Department of Homeland Security officials that teams of asylum officers were being dispatched to the border quickly to process the migrants for their asylum cases. They know we are coming. The whole world is watching, Arinio Mujica said, an organizer with the transnational group Pueblos Sin Fronteras. They are trying to please Donald Trump instead. The migrants traveled together in a caravan, partly for protection, but also partly to make a political statement. The journey from Central America through Mexico to the United States, as everybody knows, is very dangerous. Migrants have reported being robbed, beaten, extorted, sexually assaulted by criminals who prey on them. Most of the migrants are from the Northern Triangle countries of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. The annual caravan is intended to call attention to the drug cartel and gang violence, the political turmoil, the poverty in Central America, driving men, women, LGBT, and transgender people to take refuge in neighboring countries. This year, about 80% of the migrants traveling the caravan are from Honduras, which has one of the highest murder rates in the world and experienced political turmoil following November's presidential election. Many believe that election was tainted by fraud. Now, Donald Trump considers the caravan an affront to the U.S. immigration laws and a threat to border security, since some of the migrants say they plan to cross the border illegally, while others are applying for asylum. 3 days after Easter, Trump's administration announced the deployment of the National Guard. You may have remembered they sent 25,000 Guard troops down to the border to secure the border from this specific caravan. After Trump ordered the National Guard troops to the southern border, organizers said the caravan would stop after reaching Mexico City. Some groups then splintered off to travel on their own, and others decided to remain in Mexico, where the government, under pressure from the United States, provided transit permits allowing migrants to stay and apply for asylum there. But organizers decided to continue to accompany the caravan to the border, since the majority of those remaining were women and children. From Mexico City, the caravan traveled to the U.S. border on buses and by riding on top of freight trains. The caravan has arrived in Tijuana, a city in Baja California, south of San Diego, California. They are staying in a shelter there. Lawyers are participating in legal consultations with migrants who plan to seek asylum and will tell them what to expect during credible fear interviews with the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service officers. Those interviews will determine whether the migrants' claims that they will face persecution or torture if they would return to their home country meet the minimum standards to pursue an asylum claim. As of today, the caravan that made it to Tijuana has not been allowed into the United States. They've been turned away because immigration says the facility is still full. There are protesters on both sides. And with us today, we have Pastor Emma Lozano. Now, Emma Lozano presides over the Lincoln United Methodist Church in Chicago, Illinois, where most of her congregation are dealing with some sort of immigration issues. Pastor Lozano just got back from Tijuana, Mexico. There she is. She went to visit Miguel Perez, a recently deported United States veteran, and while she was there, Pastor Lozano performed the wedding ceremony at the Tijuana border for 4 couples from the caravan, all refugees who recently arrived from Central America and presumably have or will be shortly applying for asylum. So with us today, let me welcome Pastor Emma Lozano.
Thank you for having me on your show, Brett.
Tell us a little more background about this caravan, because that's all we hear from Donald Trump for the last few weeks is the caravan is coming. And the way he makes it out, it sounds like the entire countries of Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala are pouring out at the millions and overriding the U.S. border. And that obviously is not the case.
That is not the case. And these people, especially from the report you just gave, 80% come from the country of Honduras. And they are fleeing right now violence. After the recently had election in November, it got worse. And we're having reports from human rights advocates that are there and observing that many of the people are living in chaos. There's violence every day. People are being killed in the streets. There's protests all the time. So we're looking at families that are leaving their country of origin, not because they want to, it's forced migration, situations of violence where they're children and they have no other alternative. Then they get on top of trains that are very, very dangerous in order to make their journey towards a country where they can apply for asylum. And that's what's happening. And I've seen them. These are families that are leaving and they're coming together. And we should, as international law, open our borders for those that are fleeing violence to give them that asylum that they so much need at this time.
So now, this is obviously organized. It's not like all of a sudden everybody decided on April 1st to get in buses and cars and start driving north. Who organized this entire caravan of cars, and how did they pick who's coming, and was everybody welcome to come?
Well, first and foremost, the caravan is for protection. It's very difficult to make that particular journey, and you have safety in numbers. And there are activists and human rights defenders that are there to walk with them throughout their journey, coming across the borders, looking for refuge in other countries. And so because of those numbers, they pick a date where those that are fleeing violence and that can unite with others and feel that safety in their numbers and come across. So who is organizing that are human rights advocates, defenders, Pueblos Sin Fronteras, and other human rights organizations, churches, pastors, those that are willing to walk along with the people and try to keep them safe as they make their journey.
Now, this is the most, I guess, well-publicized caravan? Are there multiple caravans coming, or is this basically it?
People leave their country at all different times depending on their particular circumstance. But this is a caravan that comes out yearly, and they're organized, like I said, by the human rights defenders, helping and assisting people leave poverty or violence. And in this case, Honduras is experiencing extreme violence, many deaths since the last election in November that many are accusing of being fraudulent. And a lot of money is coming from the U.S. to support that military. And we're asking people to join in and make sure that our tax dollars are not used to hurt and cause chaos and assassinate people that are not in favor of the current administration there in Honduras, because our information is that they're the ones that have caused the different assassinations that have taken place of journalists, of environmentalists, of those that are there that have been trying to bring Honduras to a better place for the people who live there.
Now, thinking and listening to you, how ironic that is that you have the Trump administration funneling money to Honduras to basically, what you're saying is basically rig a fraudulent election in favor of the military there. The military is abusing people's rights. They're leaving as a result of the chaos and the danger and the death surrounding them. And then it's being caused by money from U.S. tax dollars going to Honduras. People are fleeing north to avoid this entire chaos and what many consider a war going on down there, only to be stopped, be robbed, or sexually assaulted on their way north, and then to be stopped at the border and say you're not welcome in the United States.
And the way you explained it is perfectly what we see is happening in Honduras, and we're asking people to start to write to their congressman. We understand that there's a bill in Congress right now saying stop aid to Honduras, because they're actually aiding what is going on in Honduras that's causing the forced migration from that particular country. And then when they come here, they're told that they are not welcome, that they are going to be a charge on our country, but it's being created by this country to begin with. So we're asking all of that to be reviewed, and so that people don't have to leave their particular countries, that they can live there. And but now that they're there, I saw women, babies, families that were made the whole journey up until the border, and then they were forced to wait. The babies were sick already. You could see how it was cold that night, and in Tijuana, which is a border with San Diego, there was a whole march of supporters that came from California to support them because they're understanding what's going on. And we should not be the ones that are saying, closing the door to them when our tax dollars are supporting what forced them to leave their country in the first place.
So I agree with you 100%, and I wish that that news, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, if they actually had cameras and interviewed some of the people who were there and saw some sick babies, what a humanitarian crisis we have at the border. And I think that the American public would be a little less callous if they actually saw what was going on. It's much easier to be callous when you don't see pictures and you don't see video.
And I think we need to understand that right now the whole immigration issue needs to be re-examined, because right now we have about 58,000 Hondureños that are living in this country since Hurricane Mitch in 1998. And since then they have been paying taxes, living here legally, and now they're being told your time is up and they're going to have to leave the country, while the U.S. is sending millions of dollars to support a military coup in Honduras that is forcing migration north to this part of the country. I think this all has to be reviewed, because the people that are already here legally, that have roots in this country, have contributions, own property, there's no reason right now to have them deported.
To go back to a military zone. I agree with you, because all you're doing is forcing them to get back in a caravan and come to the border.
Yeah, that is sending them to poverty and maybe even death.
Correct.
So why would we do that when they are already rooted in the United States of America, contributing to the economy? So we have to understand what is in the minds of the Trump and Trump supporters. Why would they force these people out when they've already made roots and contributing to this economy?
Well, the Trump administration says it's perfectly safe to go back to Honduras. That's the whole idea behind temporary protected status. When the temporary protected status is up, it's because the president says it's perfectly safe to go back and live in Honduras. And what you're saying is it is probably more unsafe now than at any time in the last 20 years to actually go back to Honduras.
This would be the worst time to return to Honduras, because you would be taking your family. Now these people have U.S. citizen children and maybe even grandchildren. And to leave this country to go into a war zone, a civil war out there, would be a disaster, and these families would be ruined. And I understand that there's extreme stress that's going on with these families right now, but we need to look over all of the immigration issues in this country, because we're even deporting U.S. veterans
that is true,
that have served in
honorably,
our country's
honorably
wars.
served.
Honorably served. And when they return with the PTSD and they have issues, and they've not been given the citizenship that they fought for, this Constitution and this flag, and then are deported, is an embarrassment.
It's a disgrace. More than an embarrassment, it's an absolute disgrace. We've had some of those deported veterans on. I know you know some of them. One of them actually returned as a U.S. citizen, but it took over a decade. But yes, it is absolutely a disgrace. But let's talk about, we know how bad it is in Honduras now, and the caravan is coming. And it started with 1,600 people, this particular caravan that Trump was tweeting about, that he sent the 25,000 National Guard to the border to protect the border from these 1,600 people coming in the caravan.
From my understanding, about 200 reached the border. And from those, I think 180 are in detention or being already serviced at the border. And decisions being made whether or not they're going to be allowed to enter.
Do you know the exact reasons or general reasons why some of the people dropped off?
Well, some of the reasons were because they are staying in sanctuary places in Mexico that have been provided for them, and they are looking for a way to live and raise their families there in Mexico. Coming to a hostile country with an administration led by someone named Donald Trump, is probably not the most appealing place to come. So I think that they're looking elsewhere for refuge, and if they can find it there and find jobs, they're probably not going to move towards here. Those that do have family already here that have been here since Hurricane Mitch, since the late 90s, they may continue to make their way here. Those that made it all the way to the border and have crossed, I know the couples that I married are already in California, and I'm happy for them, and I hope that they make a life there and that there are churches and people that can afford them sanctuary while they're here. But that is the nature of the caravan. These people are looking for a place to live. It doesn't have to be the United States, but if they have family here, that's what family reunification is. For Melania Trump, they don't call it chain migration, they call it family reunification. But when you talk about Latino families or African families or Haitian families, now you're talking about chain migration, and we don't want these people here.
You're 100%, because they use those words to disguise the real reasons behind why they're doing what they're doing.
Absolutely.
I would suspect that if it was a caravan of Norwegians at the border, as Donald Trump said, he likes Norwegians, they would be much more welcoming than what they're doing with the Hondurans and the El Salvadorans. I had read recently that Attorney Jeff Sessions said that people who come to the border, they'll no longer, you said 180 of them are right now in detention applying for asylum, that they're no longer going to have family jails, that they may even separate children from their mothers. Have you seen any of this?
I've seen that in the past, and with Jeff Sessions saying this, it took us a long, long time for us to fight for the families to be able to stay together, especially the infant children and their mothers. But I've seen in the past that they were separated, and they would keep like infant children if the mother is breastfeeding and things like that. But we fought and we raised this issue because it's inhuman, and it's against any basic human rights to separate a mother from her child, or even an adult child or an adolescent child from their parents. And we fought for these things, and what they're trying to do is use this as a way to for people not to want to come to the border for fear that they would be separated from their children. They've already made the journey this far, and we're telling them that we'll fight for them and we'll try to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I've even talked to Border Patrol people, the authorities there. They don't agree with Jeff Sessions on this. They've seen how children suffer, and they've seen the crying children when they're taken from their mother's arms, and they don't want to do this. And this is inhuman, and even if that's your job, it is really something that no one really wants to do.
And not only does no one want to do, I would hope that at some point the Border Patrol would say, you know, even though this is my job, this is so inhuman, it is such a disgusting thing that they're doing, I won't do it. You know, at some point I hope somebody speaks up about it.
I hope that will happen, and I hope we get reports about it.
To endure what these people have endured, how bad it is in Honduras to actually want to leave and endure what you went through, risk your life, risk your health, risk the life and health of your family, may not even survive, may be raped, killed, disease, tortured, to say I'd rather have that than live where I am. That says a lot about how bad it is in Honduras. Would you agree with that?
I am totally in agreement with that, Brad, and that is exactly what they do. Who wants to cross a desert with gallons of water? That's why the caravan exists, so that people can find safety in numbers. But many of them have braved that because they can't wait for a caravan to be organized, or for organizers of human rights to help them across. And they do it on their own, and thousands of them are left in the deserts to die of the heat. And this last year, there was like a cold climate, and some of them died from hypothermia. I'm also part of an organization of activists that work to try to find those that are lost in the desert or in the mountains, and try to get people to go and either look for the bodies or to rescue them. But they leave their countries not because they want to come all the way to Charleston, South Carolina, because they like the climate there. They come there because they have to come. They come there because there's really no alternative for them. They come there because they want to live somewhere where it's safe.
It's
So they
survival.
brave and they risk their lives to get there, but it's still risking is better than where they are right now. Some of them send their children alone. They rather their child have a chance than living there and die in the countries that they're in right now.
Now, what do you say to Donald Trump and the Sean Hannitys of this world and the Stephen Millers, who's Trump's immigration advisor, who say, well, yeah, it's maybe sad, but, as a sovereign country, we have a right to secure our borders, and this is an all-out assault on our border, and if we allow everybody in, they'll overtake our country.
Their motivations are not genuine, and they don't help our country. Every year we need workers. Every year there needs people in the fields. They need jobs that U.S. citizens don't want to take, and et cetera. And we need to understand that every day we need a migration to come to this country in order for our economy to be strong and our country to be strong. And we're a country of immigrants, and through our diversity is what makes us strong. And I say to them that maybe they're more motivated by racism than anything else. And I think that that's evil and that's wrong and it's unchristian. But I also think that they are trying to raise this kind of hatred towards people that are unlike themselves, because we had heard already how why don't we get people from Norway to come to this country? Why don't we have people from other European countries to come here?
And I would say the reason why people from Norway don't want to come here, it's because the exact reason why people from Honduras do want to come here. People in Norway are not living in a civil war. Their life is not in danger. They're living in peace. There would be no reason for them to pick up and leave, unlike what you have just described with Honduras. Now, you have 180 of them right now are in detention. They would rather sit in jail at the border on the Mexican side while their asylum claim is pending versus go back to Honduras. I haven't seen any of these asylum applications. I'm not exactly sure what is being said and stated in these applications. Have you seen any of them? And what have you heard from the lawyers on the ground there, what they think the likelihood of success is?
I have to believe that the success rate is going to be unanimous. I have to believe that as a pastor. As the attorneys look at these interviews, as a family or a person comes through asking for asylum, they have to pass what is called an interview for credible
Correct.
fear. Coming from Honduras, if they're coming from El Salvador, if they're coming from even parts of Mexico that I know that the violence is, like very, very high, they're going to pass that credible fear. And they're going to be able to come into the country, and then we're going to be able to find them attorneys, because within the first year that they're here, they need to have an attorney. None of this is cheap. All of this is going to cost them. It's already cost them the risk to come to this country. And they're willing to work, and they're willing to be a part of this country. And some of them will be entrepreneurs. Some of them, their children will grow up to be maybe the next congressman of this
Right.
country. But we have to give them that opportunity. And I hope that they all make it across, and this country needs them as much as we need to open our borders to allow people who are in danger to come in.
Or their grandchildren may become the vice president of the United States, because I just read an article that Mike Pence's grandparents immigrated from Europe through what he would call chain migration, where one brother came and then got the rest of the brothers and sisters in. And now Mike Pence, 2 generations later, is now the vice president of the United States.
I hope he hears this, because that's great information.
Yes.
To give out to the rest of the public, and I'll use that. Thank you so
Yes.
much for that.
So now you went down to the border, and you are a pastor, and you performed 4 marriage ceremonies between people in the caravan. Can you tell me how that happened?
Well, first and foremost, some of the couples that were getting married have already been couples. They had children already in their country of origin, and when they were facing to come into asking for asylum, they wanted to do it as a family. So I was there performing weddings for couples that were carrying their infant children and holding their hands of their children, and making that commitment to each other to fight to stay together as they crossed the border. They didn't want to get separated without having said those vows to each other that they would be together forever. They made the hard journey, and they wanted to make sure that in the name of God and the Jesus Christ, that they were committed to each other and that they would fight to stay together as a family. And I was so privileged and honored to have done that wedding. I cried at the wedding. It was very moving and emotional for me to see the babies sniffling because they had been out all night. Felt cold myself, and I was saying they're out and they won't let them even in, and they're sick, and they did this because they love each other and they want to stay together as a family.
You know, I would say when I first heard about this story and that you married people at the border, at my first blush I said to myself, boy, that's not very romantic to get married at the border. But as you just described it, I can't think of anything more romantic than traveling with the man and woman you love, with a child together, enduring what they endured, and said, we're going to go through this together. We're not leaving each other.
It was one of the most beautiful wedding ceremonies that I've ever performed, and most moving. And the vows that they gave to each other were so truthful and honest and loving that I would do it again if I was asked. I would travel and pay all my expenses just to marry somebody who is that committed to each other. The children that were there were the witnesses of the love of their parents and how they were dedicated. They made this journey to keep their families together. That's what America's all about. People that make a journey, that are committed, that want to keep strong families here. And this is what we should be opening our borders for. These families, they're going to stay together. And I helped them do that by forming the wedding in the name of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
Amen.
You know what? I'm getting emotional listening to you, and I usually don't get emotional on this show, and you're making me very emotional. You have your own family's immigration story. You want to tell us a little bit about it?
Of course. You know, my church where I am the pastor of, we have at least, I would say, 40 members of our church, 40 families that are right now in immigration hearings or cases where they're being threatened by deportation. One of the members of our church, Cecilia Garcia, she's a U.S. citizen born in Chicago. Her husband was stopped at a traffic stop, and he ended up being deported. Now she's raising 5 children who are all born in Chicago, and her husband in Tijuana. And we have more and more stories of this all the time, where the broken immigration system is dividing our families. We should be able to marry whomever we please. We're U.S. citizens. And because of the broken immigration laws, we're not able to do that, and we're separating families that love each other. And in this case, Hugo was an amazing mechanic that we all went to for our cars. They owned their own homes, and now that he was deported, now she is holding 2 and 3 jobs just in order to support the family. And Hugo's in poverty in Tijuana trying to make ends meet, and Cecilia's having to support him. Why? He's not a criminal.
Right.
This is because broken immigration laws that we need to get fixed.
It's not only the broken immigration laws, it's the absolute hypocrisy of our politicians, especially on the right, where you see people where they say we're about God and family, except only God and family about people born in America. If it's a family about somebody born in another country, we're not into that. They're very hypocritical. I don't know any other way to say it, to say that God and family are the 2 most important pillars in their life. But when you're talking about separating families and hearing these stories, it's obviously not important to them when it's somebody else's family.
We're talking about mixed status families. We're talking about U.S. citizens that have married someone from a different country and have had children with them, U.S. citizen children. We're talking about mixed status families, which is supposed to be possible and for us to marry and then become citizens in this country. It's not all that easy, and some people don't understand that. People get confused thinking that people are trying to come into our country. No, these are married couples that have U.S. citizen children, and now they're being criminalized and they're being deported. So we're trying to fight against misinformation. But I want to remind all the right wing, especially the Christians, because Jesus Christ was a migrant and he was a refugee. And you can't go to Easter Sunday and say, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, but then the next day say, we want to build a wall, we want to deport them all, and not taking into consideration their situation. I ask them to please examine their Bible.
That is very, very true. Were you given any idea when they would be getting their credible fear interviews? I believe also that if they follow a law there at the border, at the bare minimum, they should all pass their credible fear interviews, be allowed into America, and then figure out their asylum claims from there. Do you have any idea when those decisions are going to come down and when those interviews are going to happen?
Well, I understand that they have to take in, or they're prepared, or the capacity is about 350 immigrants a day, and then it takes time to situate them, and then they have to schedule for the interviews. And it could take several weeks or even months. It really depends. I've seen situations where people have been given their credible fear interviews, and then they're crossed over the same day. I have people in my church like that, but I have another situation where it was a Guatemalan boy who was kidnapped in Guatemala. We got him to come to the border, and then it took him like 3 months. But I think it shouldn't take more than about 3 weeks.
If they were lucky enough to get a visa or get on a plane and come in through an airport, I know from my practice of law that the credible fear would happen in a 24-hour period, and they would most likely be allowed in.
The couples I married are now in California.
Oh, congratulations. That's wonderful. You know, you're helping so many people. You're doing such wonderful work. You're such a good spokeswoman. Tell me what your dreams are, your American dreams for not only yourself, but for what's going on at the border.
I would hope that there would be immigration law that would allow for those that have family members that were deported, that they would be able to return to this country and be reunified. I dream that we would allow people to come in to work. And I would hope that we would be loving enough to be able to, especially those that are in danger and fleeing violence, that we would be here to say, come to our country. That's what the Statue of Liberty says. I wish that we would abide by what it says. I wish that we could change the heart of Donald Trump and all of those people that are thinking that these people are evil. They have something to offer, and you have something to offer to them. And if we look at each other, we're not that much different.
I couldn't have said it any better. Pastor Emma Lozano, thank you very much. If anybody wants to be able to reach out to you or visit you in your church, how could they reach out to you?
They can call our church at 773-847-7282, or they could get on our website, www.familialatinaunida.com.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your real beautiful insight of what's going on there. And I hope it works out not only for them, but for the future generations as well that come in.
It was a pleasure talking to you, Brother Brad. I hope I can talk to you in person one day.
I hope so too.
God bless you.
Thank you.